Today we're going to talk about some new multi-tools from a company called True or True Utility. Now we have a plier based one right here, as well as sort of something in the pocket knife realm. And we're going to just talk about them both, what they have done that's quite interesting, sometimes maybe even better than other multi-tool brands, and what they probably could do a little bit better. Let's go ahead and get started. Now the deal with these pocket knives and multi-tools from True Utility is that in a concept, they actually have done a pretty darn good job, I have to say. In some ways better than some of the major brands. Where they fall down is, well, we're going to describe that in a minute, but first let's go through the tool set on this pocket knife. The first thing you'll notice is we have a Tanto blade that has a liner lock, so it's a locking blade. Not actually, no, very little play, which is great. So that's good. It also has, and this is actually the biggest thing for me, is a bit driver that uses standard 1/4-inch bits and actually has storage for a second bit on the inside and locks both in the 90-degree position as well as the 180-degree position. So there's a little bar right here that presses down on the spring, disengaging the lock. Now I've always liked this style of locking mechanism. It actually simplifies the way things can be built and actually is a little bit more secure because you can increase the amount of pressure being put on the locking implements. So that I like. I think that's actually pretty cool, and probably the biggest reason why you might want to consider something like this. Now the third item on this tool is this really massive bottle opener thing. Now it's just a bottle opener, and it's really heavy, and it's a little, and it doesn't lock. So on one hand, they've done some cool things with the bit driver and the blade, but then they just kind of filled the space because they felt that was more important than just making it lighter. That's unfortunate. And you know, this definitely could have been lighter. Let's see, do they list the exact weight? They do not, unfortunately. So it's a 2.75-inch blade, and the thing is the steel on that blade is a 3CR. So pretty much like bottom of the barrel, not really passable, but you know, it's a cutting surface kind of thing. Like it's really low grade steel is what I would consider a 3CR. So on one hand, you have this great bit driver, which is, I think, the biggest reason to consider it. And then on the other hand, you have the rest of the tool, which kind of falls down a little bit. That's my thoughts on this. The good news is that these are pretty cheap. And as someone who likes to pirate things out of different tools that are really good, this bit driver, assuming the pivot sizes are correct, might make an appearance in a custom tool in the future because I really like the fundamental design of it. So they've done a pretty good job with it, and this is the reason why you would get the tool in the first place. If you want a locking bit driver and a one-handable blade with a pocket clip, and the pocket clip is not very good, but it does work, this might be an option. Hey, you know, that's something, actually, and I think True Utility has the right concept. The question is, can they make it worth the purchase by improving the materials and maybe thinking it through just a little bit more in the future? Now, the bigger surprise for me is the multi-tool, the plier-based multi-tool. At 6.5 ounces, it's similar in weight to the Leatherman Sidekick, which has also a quite very similar tool set. And in some ways, this kind of improves on it in a number of ways. So the first thing I want to talk about is on this side, we have that locking bit driver that we did from the utility knife, the pocket knife. Now, I also want to notice that this is actually narrower, weirdly enough, than that pocket knife, and I do like that. I'm glad that it does. And it has both the 90-degree stop and the 180. Well, actually, it's not 180, it's like 170 degrees. For whatever reason, they decided they didn't want to make a good bit driver that's centered. They just want to make it awkwardly and annoyingly off-center. So when you're twisting it, you have to go like that for some silly reason. I hate it when you go, like, you have this something really good like this, and then they just kind of miss the mark by that much. This is a little bit of a frustrating thing for me, but it is a locking bit driver, and that's pretty unusual. So we also have two bits in here. And the last thing I didn't mention when we talked about the pocket knife is they cut this, I'm sure for looks, but you lose out on strength for the bit driver, and more importantly, you also make it impossible to be used as a 1/4 inch driver. So some screws actually have a 1/4 inch head rather than a slot for you to screw in. So having a 1/4 inch driver would actually be very useful, but it only works if this is flush, if everything is flush and it can actually match up to the screw head. Those two things, if they change those, actually it would be pretty good, and by itself might carry this multi-tool into something worth considering. Now we also have a blade on this side. It is pretty hard to deploy, but thankfully it has thumb studs. And all of these tools are unlocked with this lock bar, similar to what's happening on the other side. I don't have a problem with that. In fact, I kind of like this kind of locking system. It allows the lockup to be even stronger because of the leverage of the bar. This has the weirdest tool ever in the middle, which is a sort, I think supposed to be a reamer and a bottle opener, but it just ends up being terrible at everything, pretty much, because it doesn't have a sharp edge all the way down, and it tapers too far. It's just too triangular in nature. I guess this is great for starting holes, and that's pretty much what you're going to end up using it for the screwdrivers. The other thing I don't like is that because the lock bar is sitting so low, I can't press it easily without getting in between these two longer implements that stand a little bit taller. Now, the last implement on this side is a locking saw, and this is also in a 3CR, and it is tapered, so that's good. They did it right, at least, and pretty comfortable. I think it's going to be pretty good. It's pretty sharp as well. That, you know, is something. That's good. Now, on the inside, we have a spring-loaded pair of pliers with, for some reason, we have a crimper in there to weaken the plier for no reason. And on top of that, to weaken the plier for no reason, we have cutouts that go all the way through. Yeah, clearly it's more about looks on this tool than it is about function, because that makes absolutely no sense. And the small amount of weight that they gain with putting that back in there, I mean, it just makes sense, right? It's going to make the plier head stronger, and that's usually a good thing when you're talking about actual tools. So that's the entire tool set. On one hand, that's actually quite a nice combination for a sub $50 price and a pretty thought through design for the most part. The materials, I think, hold it back. 3CR is basically a junk steel. I can't say it any other way. When it comes to bladed items. Now, you're using 3CR for a frame, that's different, right? It doesn't require itself to hold an edge, and toughness is kind of the more important characteristic. But when it comes to actually using it for blades, whether it's a saw or a knife, that's not so good, okay? I think with some improvements, this could actually be quite a good contender in the market, generally, because I like the tool set. I do. Even with that reamer being kind of weird, they could have just made a better one, you know, something maybe just better than that. And let's be clear, when it comes to bottle openers, there's like 100 different edges on this thing I can use to pop a bottle open. Here's one here, here's another one here. I could probably use the back of this. I can use like, my goodness, I can use so many edges on this thing to pop open a bottle. We don't need a stupid bottle opener weakening tools that don't need to be weakened. All right? Just stop. It's just so silly. And also, pulling out a multi-tool, like a full-size multi-tool to open a bottle, if it's not simple and easy, it just makes you look silly, I have to say. I'm just not a big fan of it. One other thing I did miss is this little lanyard loop, which no one's ever going to do that, but hey, it's there. That's cool. And then, is there anything else that I missed on this tool? There was something. Oh, right. That's what it is. Notice that the connection points, how the connection points on this plier works. So let me bring it together so you can kind of see what's happening here. I'm not getting a good angle. It kind of slots in and kind of pinches itself between the frame. Having trouble focusing it. I am concerned that over time, this design will wear down because the plier head is probably a softer metal than the frame. And this will no longer function as a lock to the pliers. So that is something they could also improve in as well. The concept is there. It's definitely, at least they had the right combination of tools, I think, in some ways. Maybe the reamer all isn't great, and they definitely could use that space more efficiently. But overall, the ones they did include, pretty decent. The bit driver not being a true 180, that kills me, because if that had made that change and it would be in line, I could still recommend it at like $35. This is currently sitting at like $50, and I certainly wouldn't recommend you spend that much when you can buy a Surge clone with all of its add-ons for under $40, and a Leatherman Wave clone, which has better steel and better tools, for under $30. That's kind of where things are with the budget world right now. If you're not doing something dramatically better than those clones, you're probably not going to have a place in the market. And that's probably okay, but this is a good starting point, and I hope they continue to reiterate on this, maybe with better materials. Then they could justify a $50 price or even a $60 price if they up their game a little bit. That's my final thoughts on this. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Leave me some comments down below. Is this a tool you've had in your collection? Is this something that interests you? And what do you think about the way it looks? I think, if nothing else, True Utility really understands how to market things properly. As always, thank you for your time, and we'll talk again soon.